right, good morning, everybody, and thank you very much for introducing the panel so that I don't have to do it. I've got the clock in front of me, and so we are going to kind of go rapid fire here to make sure that we cover off on a lot of different topics. But first, one quick note, you might be wondering why someone from the E.O. Wilson Biodiversity Foundation is moderating a panel with Hershey's and Kraft Heinz. The late E.O. Wilson, an esteemed American biologist and the father of biodiversity, coined the phrase biophilia. If anybody's familiar with that, it's about the love of nature. And of course, without nature, these wonderful companies would not exist. And I think our panelists are going to talk about how that is true today. I'd like to also say that Wilson passed away last year, but he's most known for his ambitious, some might say outrageous goal of setting aside enough nature to protect life on Earth. And he believed, very importantly, that corporations, especially global corporations with a long reach, and businesses big and small, could play a role. All right, so purpose. Chief among our tools today to make the world better through services, through products, is somewhat obscured by a lot of existential threats. We've had the pandemic, we have the twin crises of biodiversity collapse and climate change. And so purpose, is it working? Is it doing what it's supposed to do? That's what we're going to talk about today. So let me start off with you, Jonah. With a question. 1 out of every 3 bites of food is dependent on pollinators, bees, insects, moths, butterflies. Kraft Heinz has a purpose. Can you tell us what it is and how it is your North Star and how it helps guide the organization through somewhat perilous times?
Sure, great question. By the way, great way to open up the session about biodiversity. I think sometimes we can forget about that, the importance of that. And it's really the building blocks of everything, why we're all here, really. So. I have Master's of Science in Conservation Biology, Ecosystem Management, and I sometimes go back to that, you know, and when we're like in board meetings or something, say, hey, don't forget about ecosystem functioning, and don't forget about this. So, but let me answer your question. You know, one of our Kraft Heinz, at Kraft Heinz, our vision is to sustainably grow by delighting more consumers globally. But there's a double entendre with that word sustainable in there. So it's, you know, it's sustainable in terms of ensuring that the company can exist tomorrow, but it's also all about the 3 Ps: people, profit, planet. And embedded underneath that are several values. Some of them that I bring out in ESG steering group meetings a lot are things like we champion great people, we dare to do better every day, we do the right thing, we own it. So all of these things, are high-level things, but when you break them down, we're talking about a very specific, work stream that's related to biodiversity, that's related to, you talked about the pollinators. We do stuff globally where we're trying to ensure that the ecosystem is functioning so that food can be produced. We can work with our growers. Our growers depend on pollinators. It also helps us with a lot of our ESG ambitions. Like, for instance, we announced to be net zero by 2050. At the end of 2021, we made this announcement. We have to have our emissions by 2030. About upwards of 60% of those Scope 3 emissions are embedded with our growers. I'll hand it over in a second because I know we don't have much time, but we're doing so many different things that hit on all of these things. And in terms of the times are perilous, our CEO, our board, our key leadership at Kraft Heinz, we think it's, yes, times can be perilous, but it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. I always talk about ESG as a marathon. Yes. And so you have to set up correctly for that marathon. So, during the pandemic, for example, we really felt the responsibility as a global, top leading global food company to provide sustenance to the world, to keep food on the shelves as critical infrastructure, keep operating where they were shutting down factories in some places, to increase our donations, our philanthropic efforts. And we were able to do that. In fact, we actually increased all those efforts. And we reduced our own supply chain loss optimization. We got better about that. So, great. Long-winded answer, but we really take that to heart, and it's one of the core things that we try to accomplish.
Thank you for that. And Lee, we were talking earlier when we were preparing for this, and you introduced the purpose of the Hershey's company, which is to make more moments of goodness, which I love that as a former marketer and ad agency guy. I just feel like that just hits the spot. But how does this translate into action? Goodness into action. Can you just give us some insight into that purpose?
Sure. And so, we talk about our purpose a lot and make more moments of goodness. Typically, when I say one of our brands, Hershey's, Twizzlers, I can look out on the audience and people start smiling, right? Because you immediately relate to your experience with our brands. And so really how we think about purpose and the values, like Jonah talked about, is the how behind the purpose, right? It's how we go about making those products, sourcing those ingredients, the people we work with, the suppliers we engage with. And so for us, with 98% household penetration, we really have to think about, I'll start with diversity of our workforce. We want that to replicate the consumers that we serve. We get better insights. We talk to them about what we're thinking and what we're doing, and they have a large hand in some of the decisions and the choices that we make. I'll also I'll go back to the pandemic as Jonah was talking about. I think it's just a really great time frame for making more moments of goodness, right? I'm not sure people would consider our brands critical food, right? Some people do. We tell them all the time, it's not your center plate food. But it is something that in moments like a pandemic, having that accessible, affordable luxury when times are really tough was really important. It was important with our retailers to keep shelves stocked, to create less of a sense of chaos at a time when there were empty shelves everywhere. It was really important for us to think about the economic development and the power that we have. A lot of people don't know we source 90% of the fresh milk in a 100-mile radius of our plant in Hershey, Pennsylvania, we buy.
Wow.
If we were to stop production, the economic ripples that would have been substantial. And so those are the kinds of things. So when I say make more moments of goodness, right, we want people to immediately connect that to our brands. But as a workforce, we want people to really feel good about those moments.
Oh, thank you for that. And that makes a ton of sense. I think earlier, just in the first session, we heard about the necessity for getting rid of short-term thinking, right? And I think this is clearly an evolution in purpose. Allison De Silva, can you tell us, you've got 20 plus years of experience. You were there when purpose was started. Mm-hmm. Give us a little insight. How is it evolving now? Where is it going based on some of these recent changes that we've experienced?
Yeah, because what a 2.5 years we had, right? And a lot has changed. Really key 3 buckets, if you will, of things that I've seen evolving. First, we all know that purpose is important, but what we saw in the last 2.5 years is that when it's well understood, articulated, and integrated into the company, it allowed companies to move faster, to know what to do, how to respond, in a way that was building equity in the organization versus transactional, making a donation and moving on. We counseled over 60 clients during that time, and I would say about 20 to 30% had that purpose, and they acted right away. The others, they got there, but it took longer. You had to go through the motions. They did get there. Most companies did. So I think that we saw that when done right, it can really be a driver for the business moving forward. The second thing is ESG, right? We're talking a lot about it today. Most companies are still really confused about that. They had a corporate responsibility team or a sustainability team, and now guess what? You're ESG people, and you're all experts. So there's still a lot of confusion there, and it's okay to admit that. And what I like to say, we all know ESG, and Mindy and team said this, that ESG is an investor framework. It's about evaluating a company's financial performance, mitigating risk. It's about metrics and disclosures. It's not necessarily about how are you progressing, advancing, changing the world on those issues that are important to all of your stakeholders. So I like to tell clients, ESG is just a plus up of corporate responsibility or sustainability. Now we have to think about the investor priorities. We have to think about risks and issues in new ways. And then the third thing, very quickly, is the focus on employees being the heart of everything. 2.5 years ago, our clients, 80% would say, we're focused on external comms. That paradigm flipped. When we talk now about anything having to do with purpose, ESG, employees are the #1 audience. If they can't see it, feel it, touch it, and believe it, don't even bother, entering. So, and also your employees are looking at you to act very quickly. So that matters too. You're going to get your hand slapped if you wait too late to respond about what to do. So those are 3 things I'm seeing.
Okay, that's great. Thank you for that. And I think it's I think we're hearing a refrain here about people and about employees. And so let's pay attention to that. But let's take a quick pivot and talk about case studies, because everyone likes a good story. Let's talk about some of the innovations, because after all, we have two of the great innovation companies of our age here. So I'm going to ask Jonah and Lee a couple quick questions about that. So Jonah, first, Kraft Heinz just recently introduced a entirely paper-based ketchup bottle, which is just amazing. It's really interesting. But I have to ask a question. I think we all understand, to reduce plastics is important, but how do you make that point within the organization? How do you get the rest of the organization to care about that innovation and take it through, scale it, build off of it? That would be one of my questions for you.
Sure, yeah. We're really excited about our Pulpex partnership and the paper-based Heinz-made ketchup bottle, which you just introduced. In terms of answering your question, you really have to embed it from, it's sort of like when you plant a seed, you have to plant the seed, allow the roots to grow deep and water and nurture it and do all those things. And so that's kind of similar to what we do at Kraft Heinz. So one of the first things I did that I've also been involved with and done at other companies is set up an ESG steering group. So at the highest of levels, the board has executive oversight over that. Our C-suite provides support, assistance and so forth. So there's also that pillar, and then there's an ESG steer co, and you have to make sure that all the right employees, as Allison was talking about, the importance of employees, are at the table. So your growth officers are there, and your marketers, and your brand, and your strategy and finance, and all those. And then similarly, you do subcommittees, and we've got 8 at Kraft Heinz in things like responsible sourcing, in this case, sustainable packaging, manufacturing, and animal welfare, all these things, and those are cross-functional. And so they have in sustainable packaging, because it's not just our R&D folks, which really led a lot of the work that we're talking about with our Pulpex. It's not just it's also our brand teams that then have to take that to their customers. It's also our finance have to say, hey, how's this going to hit our P&L?
So it's it's a group effort, and it sounds like you've been able to pull a lot of people to the table, right, in order to make that work. And I assume, Lee, you've had to do something similar around a really interesting campaign that Hershey's started locally. I think it was in Brazil, called Hershey, H-E-R, capital S-H-E, Hershey. And it was a hit, and now it's going out globally. And I just want to point out that it's specifically designed, and I'm going to quote, I think, something from a press release here, to make the invisible visible, as it specifically relates to women. So why focus on women? I know obviously Hershey's has an enormous track record in working on societal issues, but why elevating women? Can you tell me that story, and girls as well?
Yes. So I think, I just was talking about our focus on diversity. We think, being representative of our consumer base is really just great business. We've had a strong track record on really focusing on what I would say populations that are maybe underrepresented. Women has been a core strength of ours. We've been named the top female-friendly company in the world before. We're really proud of that. But the focus, this was a really organic type of activation. We worked with female artists. We worked with how do we partner on how the enterprise, we partner with Girl Up and Girls on the Run. How do we bring all of this together and really use our packaging as a canvas to actually show the world about making the invisible more visible? We had another campaign with Kit Kat and Hershey called Beat of the Music, where again, we partnered with the Memphis Music Initiative to really raise up Black musicians, youth female Black artists, to actually do the branding on our campaign. And then again, we partnered it with an organization that we have a really strong employee connection to. So all the things we're talking about, the employee, the organic nature of these campaigns, and then bringing them to brands. But we call it the She campaign. We get a lot of criticism for the use of our grammar, so I'll just apologize now.
It's allowed.
But it's when you have a name like Hershey and you can use she to your advantage, it was just ripe for the taking. So.
And fun, and as it should be, right?
Exactly.
Okay, so I just want to point out for the audience here who's listening in, there's a couple of things that I want to bring up to the top. We've talked about people, and we've talked about our employees as being part of that evolution for purpose. We've talked about our platforms. Our packaging gives us another opportunity to continue to innovate. And of course, we've talked a little bit about the purpose itself and how to drive the purpose as a way to get all the stakeholders to the table across many different functions. That's something that Jonah mentioned. Let's talk about some of the concerns or challenges there. There is a lot of cynicism that we still face even today, and perhaps even more so coming out of the pandemic. Maybe there's something called purpose washing. I don't know, but there certainly can be a performative communications, and I think all of us think about what is our responsibility to avoid that. So let's talk a little bit about that. Allison, what is performative communications? How do we avoid it in our work?
Yeah. Well, I would say over the last couple of years, it's been all about companies showing up, making commitments when something happens, setting a far-reaching goal, and that's really important. That was very important. But now that's table stakes, and when we come to, that cynicism, it's really grounded in, well, that's great you set a goal, but it's 2050, and you're not going to be there in 5 years. That's great you're celebrating this cultural moment of time, but how are you really using the force of your business to show progress against that? So, what we're, and both of you gave great examples of sort of building it within, ensuring that it's authentic, it's tied to your DE&I goals or your sustainability goals. And so where we say in the past it's about showing up, moving forward, it's all going to be, and it needs to be grounded in action and impact. That's great that you have a goal. How are you getting there? What sort of impact are you having? And we tell our clients, they're saying, oh, we're setting a new goal. We want to be in, Fortune. No, that's not going to happen. They don't care. They want to know, how are you innovating? What lessons are you learning? Where are you falling down? Who are you collaborating with? I mean, that's where the communications is going in terms of stop just saying, stop intent, and let's really ensure that we're showing what we're doing, again, grounded in business strategy and taken externally.
Great, thank you for that. And we've got just a few minutes left, and I want to now make sure I give everybody a chance to kind of wrap up and give us a key takeaway from this morning already and from this conversation. But I want to sort of kick it off by sort of saying it's Halloween, right? And all the Halloween ads are on television
Super
now.
Bowl.
It's your Super Bowl. It's an exciting time. It's my daughter's very excited, by the way. We're talking to you.
We love it.
There's a Geico ad on television. They kind of brought it back where there's a bunch of teenagers in a horror flick, right? We've all seen this, right? And they all choose to hide behind the chainsaws. You've seen this? And the writing is brilliant. It says, if you're in a horror movie, you make dumb decisions. So I think one of the things I have to ask us is, listen, it can feel like a horror movie right now, but thank God we're all together again, and we can kind of get back to work. But things have changed. And what advice do you have for your counterparts in the audience, for your team back at home, to avoid making dumb decisions and making the right decisions, knowing what you know now coming out of the other side of this? And if each of you could just start, and we'll start with you, Lee.
Okay. I think I think we've heard it time and time again, every panel. Getting the alignment at the board, your executive team, your employees, being crystal clear, making choices. And that is really hard because all the things we talk about are important. They just can't all be our important project, right? So for me, and listen, a lot of pain and, love, TLC, in terms of getting that alignment, because the connection between our business, it's no longer ESG strategy. It's no longer sustainable. It's a business strategy that has to have this as part of it. And if you aren't focused on that, you are not focused on the right thing. I mean, I spend more time with our operators than I do anybody else right now.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would echo very similar. And actually, from the earlier panel this morning, they're talking about I forget what the actual exact term was, but the tyranny of short-termism or something. We're a big company, we're a global company, and like I was saying before, it's a marathon, not a sprint, and yet we have like factions, I'll call it, that are constantly trying to do sprints on something. Like, we need to make a decision today on whether or not we're going to do coal at this, at our new factory or something.
Yeah.
Like, what did you just say? Because we're exiting coal. That's our plan. Or
Right.
we have this renewable electricity commitment, and we're doing X, Y, and Z, and we've got biofuels over here. And it's short-term thinking. Well, the coal is the right price. Yeah, but it's the right price now. But how about 4 or 5 years from now, and how about all the other implications, all those stakeholders and factors. So I would echo, it's sort of getting the right buy-in and alignment throughout, so it's proliferate throughout the whole organization.
Thank you.
And that was going to be my answer too, because I've seen when it's not really well understood, and it's not just making sure that there's alignment, but understanding that your executive team understands the implications of what they're committing to, because a whole lot of decisions are going to have to be made grounded in your purpose, in your values, in this business strategy that you're committing to, and it's going to be hard.
Yeah.
We're in a world where you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. So make sure that it's there, there's alignment, it's well understood. And then just lastly, anytime you can connect back to what the business is doing, to that purpose, to those values, to that strategy, then it will be believed. But just saying it doesn't really make it real.
All right, thank you so much. I'd like to thank our panelists, Allison De Silva, Jonah Smith, and Lee Horner. Appreciate you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.